Fire Emblem Engage will go down in history as the game with all the toothpaste memes. But what if I were to submit to you the possibility that we could dump out all the toothpaste? Or at the very least, Alir's overly centralizing presence on the character writing of this game. Last year, I pointed out that the support system of Engage has something in common with that of Binding Blade, namely that it grants the privilege of paired endings solely to its main character. I looked over FE6's non-Roy support options and came up with what I thought would be a realistic array of paired endings for the other characters by comparing it to the other GBA games. And in the comments to that video, I got requests to do the same thing for Engage. Well, now that it's 2026 and Engage's 3rd anniversary is upon us, I figured it would be a good time to dive into that. But there are a few little problems that make this more complicated than it was for Binding Blade. For one thing, it's not especially useful to make comparisons to the other Fire Emblem on the Switch, because that's 3 houses, and it passes out paired endings like candy. It'd be faster to come up with a list of support lines in that game that don't get an ending card, and applying that same philosophy to Engage just wouldn't make for a very interesting video. There's gotta be a sense of competition, you know? On top of that, there's the matter of, well, when you actually sit down and watch the supports in this game, you start to pick up on something. These writers were clearly aware of how weighted Engage's endings are toward Alir and their relationships. And as a result, so many of these other support lines end on some kind of very obvious friend-zoning note. That's not a problem unique to Engage, mind you. You could say the same for many non-S-rank support conversations in every Fire Emblem to feature an avatar, but it was nonetheless an issue. But thankfully, as someone who's never felt constrained by the limits of canon in who I choose to ship, I'm fine with chucking a lot of that out of the window and coming up with pairings that I think would be plausible, or at least interesting. This video is going to be structured differently from the one on FE6. I'm not just going to be bouncing around the cast and counting off a list of paired endings. Rather, because Engage has an even 40 characters not including Alir, it's possible to group the entire roster into 20 pairs. Important to note here that, as in the previous video, I am not restricting this to romantic endings, which is especially crucial in a cast that includes several prepubescent children, 1 senior citizen, 2 people over 30 who look like they're senior citizens, and just so many pairs of siblings. While Fire Emblem itself can and often does go there, including in this very game, personally, I'd rather not be the one navigating that ethical minefield. So instead, I've got a wide range of pairing types, and by laying out the whole army into pairs, I can come up with little narratives about how these would play out in a hypothetical ending. Maybe it's not quite the same as the ending cards most Fire Emblem games use, but not so far off from something like Genealogy and its big variable group ending. But let's not waste any more time. In the event that Alir spends the next few centuries petting Sami and isn't available for passing out the Pact Ring, what does the epilogue of Fire Emblem Engage look like? If I were to consider this from the same perspective as FE6, and prioritize the supports that IS would be likely to turn into endings, then I don't think there's any better place to start than Diamant and Ivy. Because is there any more expected non-Alir pairing in all of Engage? It's a straight relationship between 2 characters on the box art who come bundled with a ton of baggage from their country's long-standing antagonism with one another. Their connection might not be the most romantic in the world, but then that's true of the majority of pairings in this video, so that just has to be taken as a given. Continuing with the pattern of effective political marriages, Saline and Alcris strengthen the alliance between Firene and Brodia while offering support to their respective brothers/brothers-in-law. This is one of those times where everyone in Engage being so quick to label other people their surrogate siblings starts coming off as suggestive. Rounding out this continental ring of weddings are Alfred and Temera, the endlessly extroverted rulers of allied countries offering a sunny counterpoint to their somber northern neighbors. Hortensia is a little young to be playing the marriage game, but she and Vale can be good friends regardless for the sake of improved human-dragon relations. Vale developing a connection with the Elusian royal family is always going to lead into some contemplative family drama, courtesy of that whole my dad killed your dad thing they've got going on. But we can't leave out the retainers. Boucheron and Goldmary have their own little international fling, propped up by their rare ability to keep each other on something resembling an even keel in the face of their respective character gimmicks. Céline's retainers, Louis and Chloe, come together in their mutual enjoyment of devising romantic fantasies while people-watching, even if the types of people they prefer to watch often differ. They can meet in the middle somewhere. Amber and Jade likewise make for a workable pair, not least because Amber's clumsy antics are one of Jade's biggest sources of inspiration for her comedy writing, and because it eventually turns out that she likes capturing his heroic side as well. On the business front, Lapis and Anna get to work making marketable souvenirs of Anna's home village that get her feeling uncommonly sentimental on the side. Jean and Bounet go into gardening together, which might not be as immediately profitable, but does give both of them the opportunity to share the labor of their respective professions. Elios's literal children sure are hard workers, aren't they? Speaking of, Clan and Fram fulfill their destinies as the Divine Dragon's stewards and devoted members of their fan club, which I guess Alir would still have even if they're taking it easy and probably not paying all that much attention to their squeeing followers. Vander and Pandreo spend their time hashing out comparative religious philosophies that surely work wonders for the growth of charismatic movements within the faith, while also being absolute murder on Vander's back. Maybe Pandreo can also introduce him to yoga. Next, we've got a couple of pairings that show up in the game's credits sequence, if only because these characters don't fit neatly into any other groups. Yunaka and Seedall take their show on the road, giving Yunaka a creative and all-around less depressing outlet for her talent for acting and mimicking voices. Lyndon and Saphir have more than a generation separating them, not that you know it from Saphir's design, but that comes into play when they work out that Lyndon was a soldier in Elusia's army back when Saphir's parents were killed in one of their attacks. That's not great, but hey, with Diamant and Ivy married and working together to patch up the years of bad blood between their nations, it leaves these two plenty of time to become good friends and seafood chefs. And I can't forget about the DLC characters either. Admittedly, these 5 can be rather difficult to work into a broader pairing network since their support options are a lot more limited than other characters, but there's ways to make that work, like pairing them with each other. Nell and Rafal have a lot to work through, with Rafal needing to make up for everything he did as the big bad of alternate universe Elios. And through their supports, they come to understanding a path toward reconciling as brother and sister, and probably not anything more than that, despite Nell being hung up on Alir so badly that it extends to the version of them that would be her own sibling. Oh, Fire Emblem. On a slightly less odd note, Celestia and Gregory bicker over the specific structure of the Four Winds as a found family in a way that's maybe romantic and maybe not, but either way is probably supposed to be an ironic echo of the final scene between their Four Hounds counterparts. Rounding out this set of characters are Madeline and Mauvier, and here I mean the playable Mauvier, not the identical one who dies in the DLC and that Madeline was raised by but also had a crush on. Will her relationship with this Mauvier become romantic, or settle on father and daughter? Knowing IS, the answer would be a resounding yes. Now you'll notice that up to this point, I've done my best to keep things as heterosexual as possible, because that's realistically what the developers would do in this situation. But there are a handful of characters in this game that are just incredibly hard to read as straight. Take Etier, for example, who comes with an out-and-out no-hetero conversation with her liege Alfred. If we want a Lord-Retainer pairing, it's not going to be this one. Etier actually has a few slightly sapphic options, but given who's left in this overall arrangement here, I'm going to be giving the nod to her and Panette for their common ground highlighted in the language of flowers. Marin is in a similar boat where it's near impossible not to read her as a lesbian. And while Citrine is far from her most suggestive support line, the Brodian retainer does call her cute and invite her out on a forest date where they can frolic among fauna. Rosado is queer all on his own terms since he's gender non-conforming and has his own unique views on gender courtesy of his home village that sadly doesn't appear in-game, but as I pointed out in a previous video, it's unfortunate that we never really get to see how that interacts with his sexuality. Enter Fogado, who flirts with almost all of his support partners and really lays it on thick for Rosado much to their mutual enjoyment. Finally, there's Zelkov and Kagetsu, who hit separate gay notes all over the place in their supports, even if sometimes that's a function of Kagetsu supposedly not understanding how words work. Regardless, the combined royal court of Brodia and Eleusia surely has ample room for a pair of quirky retainer boyfriends. But did you really think I'd be content leaving this video there? My abundant love of gay pairings would never allow for it. Let's take a second, more inventive stab at lining up these characters into paired endings, beginning in the same place, royal marriages. Assuming that Elios has marriage equality and/or Alir takes the time to institute it in between Sami head scratches, Diamant and Alfred are a perfectly reasonable pair. The existing alliance between Brodia and Firene is strengthened, Alfred gets in some quality muscle worship, and Diamant gets to undertake the Herculean effort of turning this twink into a himbo gym bunny. Alchrist is more surprised than anyone when he gets his own princely romance with Fogado, two younger brother archers supporting their royal siblings and being generally cute with each other like Fogado tends to be with basically everybody. Ivy and Tamara, meanwhile, round out the royal pairs this time, bringing that opposites attract hot and cold energy that's always prime ship fodder. Elios's two younger princesses instead have more personal development in mind. Céline helps Jean become a better doctor while also teaching him about the recuperative powers of tea, and probably contributes to Firene's already celebrated and diverse tea industry in the process. Hortensia is predictably not so magnanimous, but she manages to do the near impossible and tear Clan away from the side of the Divine Dragon to enjoy him as the president of her own fan club. There's a lot of royal retainers getting in on the action too. Boucheron and Kagetsu are one of those sparring-centered male bonding duos every Fire Emblem game has several of, but it also has Kagetsu wanting to quiz Boucheron on the lips. After a certain point, you can't blame a language barrier for that one. Chloe and Marin are a match made in heaven, with the former idealizing fairy tale knights and the latter striving to be as cool of a knight as possible, while also needing a woman she can be less than perfect around every now and then just so she can relax. Lapis and Goldmary seem like a more unlikely pair on the surface, but they've surprisingly got a lot in common as secret country girls, even to the point of helping Goldmary feel less haughty than usual. Louis and Rosado's support line is one of those awkward instances of localization where the original Japanese pointed out that Louis' usual thing is watching women, even though Rosado isn't a woman. That energy doesn't really carry through to their dynamic in the English version, but there's enough of a sense of queer intrigue there, along with Rosado's typical ability to bring out cute moments in his support partners, where it's easy to see this becoming a thing. Even more so Amber and Zelkov, since Zelkov scores an invite to move to Amber's hometown and demonstrate his alpaca wool knitting skills. Come on, Amber's outright asking the guy to meet his family right there. Etier's dropping more flower flirting with Yunaka, backed up by a point earlier in their supports where apparently Yunaka has Etier's perfect body, which doesn't really track with Etier's musclehead obsession, but whatever. More in the vein of that, Panette and Saphir have the combat training partner vibe you don't see as often between two women, so read into that what you will. Swinging more into the four hounds/winds side of the cast, Pandreo and Mauvier get some comparative religion discussions going while taking each other out on dinner dates. Vows of chastity don't seem to be a thing among Fire Emblem's clergy, so go for it. Vale and Madeline are in an odd place where they're both coping with people they've lost that they can now kind of sort of reconnect with via alternate universe shenanigans, but this is a princess and knight style friendship that could have some legs on it given time. Nell and Celestia have something similar going on, coupled with some of the heaviest stress on the word friend I've seen in a game that's loaded down with stuff like that. And at least they're from the same universe, so they don't have to bridge that gap. Ditto Rafal and Gregory, whose dynamic is pricklier, but also one of those where one guy gets under the other one's skin in a good way. Only a few loose ends to tie off now. Anna's going into business with Bunet this time. She chops wood for his cooking fires, he makes her food that reminds her of the home she's missing. and because this is still Anna, she finds a way to turn a profit in there somehow. Jade and Lyndon push each other to be better writers, and between the two of them manage to record the delightful nonsense playing out all over the Somniel, while Seedal encourages Citrine's inner tarot girl, which maybe also turns into one of the few straight pairings of this setup. Hard to tell, Citrine has a thing for inviting her support partners over for a visit. Finally, there's Vander and Fram, who seem to have a stronger parent-child relationship going on than Vander does with Clan, and can more than compensate for Clan ditching the Divine Dragon to hang out with human royals. Sami, sadly, cannot fascinate us all. I'm still not completely satisfied, though, so time for round 3. For starters, I think we can ditch that whole royal weddings bit. Alir's got the geopolitical situation of Elyos well in hand, so its monarchs don't have to be strategically shacking up. Amber gets up the nerve to tell Diamant that he has the soul of an alpaca, which, considering how much he adores alpacas, has to be both the highest praise imaginable, as well as fodder for some really weird sex. The Somme Royals, meanwhile, have some more sedate retainer romances in their future. Timera and Marin are another one of those intense princess and knight pairs, albeit this time with a long history to back up their connection, while Fogado and Bunet are essentially just diet Dimmy-Doo from Three Houses, and everyone knows I love me some of that. More significantly, this might be these characters' most intimate support line that doesn't feature Fogado going all in on the flirty banter, or Bunet trying to lick something he shouldn't. That's gotta mean something. But speaking of licking, Alfred and Boucheron can look forward to a relaxing future of fishing and low-key horny muscle worship that I can only assume turns high-key at some point. The thirst is real with Alfred. Everyone else is just along for the ride. Céline and Chloe continue their grand adventure together as a princess and her devoted retainer living out Chloe's fairy tale fantasies. Céline's other retainer, Louis, instead broadens his horizons with Clan's help, extending his voyeuristic tendencies to hot, sweaty muscle guys. In a game that actually knew how to make horny male characters, these conversations would be incredibly kinky. And finally, just to show you that I'm not being totally biased here as I lay out all this retainer loving, I'm not going to forget about Alprist and Lapis, possibly the most telegraphed romance of this type in all of Engage, since this is a well-known Fire Emblem staple. It's even one of the rare cases of a pairing being referenced outside their own support line, because Citrine can read the room. They make for a nice, stable couple while Diamant's off doing alpaca roleplay in the background. The Illusian Royals are tougher to work into this arrangement, not least because Ivy is literally incapable of getting gay with her retainers. Rather, she can harken back to her school days with Rafal, and crib a bit of that Three Houses energy, which I presume was the main point of the Illusian characters making such a big deal of their time at the Academy. Hortensia, on the other hand, can focus on being a teacher's pet with Lyndon, and I do mean that in a totally platonic way, let's not go there, who can instruct her in magic and also help her come to terms with the legacy of her late father. As for the Illusian retainers, Goldmary and Etier have possibly the most suggestive support line in all of Engage, with some fade to blacks and dialogue that was apparently racier in the Japanese version. And we've established by now that there's nothing polite or heterosexual about Etier. Bickering enemies to lovers, let's say? Rosado helps Pendreo see the positives in his charismatic approach to worship, and he's one of the only characters fully prepared to match Pendreo's freak with those howling parties he loves to throw. Kagetsu and Seedal bond over their skills in divination, putting out some of that astrology gay vibe that I've more than had my fill of at this point. Zelkov is the odd one out this time, pursuing a friendship and maybe more with Citrine while they start up an advice column for Brodians in need. Pivoting back over to Elyos' weirdly industrious children, Fram is another character who can help Anna miss her family less while also providing her with a new product to market. This time they're doing homemade desserts. Jean works through his discomfort at treating dedicated frontline fighters like Jade for some welcome tank-healer synergy that would matter more if tanking was really a thing in Fire Emblem. Oh well, still some good growth there. Just a few more to go now. Yunaka and Panette both know what it means to put on an act, and they see through each other better than most, except for Yunaka's still inscrutable zappy bit, but maybe they'll work that out in time. When they're not knitting or training for combat, Vander and Saphir start a support group for characters designed to look like elders even though they're not even 50. Celestia and Madeline offer a much healthier found family counterpoint to what Zephia and Marnie had going on, even if they both got the dead alternate Mauvir hanging over them. Vale and Nell have a lot of death hanging over them as well, but they can hash out what exactly it means to be a cross-universe sibling and how much brighter their futures look without one or more Sombrons around to muck things up. Lastly, Mauvir and Gregory don't have anything remotely as wild as what could be going on if this was Gris we were talking about, but ignoring the lack of masochism, they're a companionable dynamic to end this somewhat off-the-wall but still plausible parade of pairings. That is, of course, only a sample of what IS could theoretically have done if Engage had featured a more robust paired ending system. This is a game that can make it difficult to appreciate its own supports, both because of how relatively time-consuming they are to unlock, but also because of the bizarre decision to limit the support log to individual save files. But mechanical issues aside, there are some solid interactions here, ones that made me wish we'd gotten more. At least there's the possibility that the next Fire Emblem might not even have an avatar to hog the spotlight. Maybe? But anyway, down in the comments, I want to hear about your favorite supports from Fire Emblem Engage, especially if it's not one I got to talking about here. Like and subscribe to my channel as well for more Fire Emblem content. It's a new year with a new game coming up, and you know I can't wait to take a crack at the support system of Fortune's Weave. Thanks for watching, everyone. Au revoir.